As with all the Vargas, it's Brihad Parashara that really gives you what you really need to know about the Vargas. That gives you the calculations and the deities and the principles to do astrology, basically the Lajitadiya Bhashtas and the principles of judging Bhavas and all the other planetary strengths and things that Parashara gives. Those are really the essence of doing a really sound system of astrology. All the other books available, really, literally all of them, have more of these cookbook recipes that you're going to come across. And if you read a book, a modern book on Vargas, lots of times it'll replicate those sort of cookbook recipes. And those things just are never consistently useful or accurate. Okay? Which is a nice way to say that there's a reason Brihad Parashara didn't give those things. You know, Brihad Parashara tells, is basically teaching us how to read a chart. The other texts are teaching us how to, or asking us to to remember possible things that could happen. But really, astrology is just too vast to give an interpretation to one thing. Okay, to say, well, Mars in Scorpio, Dvadasamsa is going to be like this. It's just not, there's more to it than that always. Okay? For one, Mars is never in just Scorpio, Dvadasamsa. It's also in many, many other different Varga placements. Okay? We'll get to some of those things. So these cookbook sort of interpretations of planets and ascendants and signs and Vargas and stuff like that are really not a proper way to do astrology. Okay? And the reason is because those things often give character type things. For example, Mars in Scorpio Dvadasamsa, Mars causes the birth of evil, sick, and timid men. Okay? Well, that's not a pleasant, that's not a good, a desirable effect. Mars in Scorpio Dvadasamsa is given this negative effect. And that goes contrary to everything we know about astrology. Mars is in its own sign there in the Dvadasamsa. Okay? Mars is also one of the planets that represents the mother. So having Mars in Scorpio should be solid, okay, in many ways. Now, it does say birth of evil, sick, and timid men. Well, there's some truth to that, okay? But we wouldn't want to use that as a blanket statement because the type of person you are is generated based on your character, and the character has hundreds of things going into it. Starting with the Navas yogas and the other things that I cover in the Astrology of Character course. And then there's your basic psychology, and then there's the Shadbalas and all the different strengths of the Shadbalas, which comes to literally 49 aspects of your personality just from Shadbala alone. All those things combined have to do with who you are and what you're like and what you're going to behave like. Not a single thing like Mars in Dvadasamsa, which is going to make you, like it said, causes the birth of evil, sick, and timid men. Okay? So, it's not, that when you read that statement, you really expect the person to be like that. Okay? And they're just not going to be that way usually. Because there's hundreds of other factors bearing on character that aren't even being considered, right? But where does this interpretation come from? How can they even come up with that negative interpretation of Mars? Well, for one thing, we know that the swamsha, or the sign that, a planet's in, will have an effect according to Gemini. Gemini says there'll be a lack of mother's breast milk when it comes to Scorpio. And that there'll be fear of water, which means the person will have lots of emotional fears and possibly be emotionally weak. Okay, but Mars doesn't represent them as a person. Mars may represent their mother as a person, though. So Mars in that Scorpio Dasamsa, or Dvadasamsa, can possibly give a fearful mother, to some degree, who's emotionally fearful, but then whose Mars in Scorpio in its own sign has a lot of strength to deal with those fears. Scorpio gives a lack of mother's breast milk, and then we stick Mars in there, perhaps the mother will be less than nurturing and be a strong, independent woman like we'd expect Mars to be. And maybe these things can combine to create a more timid weak personality. But really, that's a bit of a stretch, but you can kind of see where some negative parts of that position come from. And, you know, but that's just no way to judge a person's character. You know, saying, oh, your sun is in, it's like doing sun signs. Saying your sun is in Aries and this makes you like this, and your sun is in Scorpio and it makes you like this. That's just such a remotely inaccurate thing, you know. And you can identify to some of those traits always. You can identify to some of those Scorpio traits, some of those Libra traits, whatever, because in all the Vargas, you've got all those traits within us. You know, we all have within us an entire zodiac of traits. Judging character, though, really has to do with, you know, looking at the Navas yogas, solar yogas, Mahapurusha yogas, looking at the Shad Balas, studying the person's psychology, looking at afflictions to their masculinity and to the feminine half of their psyche. And then we get a picture of what the person's really like. These one-shot planets and signs, ascendants and signs, things that most of the astrological texts have out there just aren't accurate. I think there's a reason that Brihat Parashara doesn't give any of those interpretations. You know, it doesn't give any of those types of interpretations whatsoever about, you know, those simple one-shot things that you find in all the other books. You know, some books like Saravelli and even Brihat Jataka, almost the entire book is just the Lagna in this sign, the moon in this sign, the planets in these signs, the moon in this Navamsha, and all this stuff. And it just doesn't give a really useful, accurate picture of the person. It's much more useful to learn like the chastity yogas that I teach in the compatibility course and the capability yogas. It's much more useful to be able to read Shad Bala, because then you got something that's really working. Okay? So with that said, we're going to talk briefly about these things, because these are things that you are going to encounter in astrology. And just like all the other Vargas, I like the symbolic images that they give when they give them for the different Vargas, but I've never really felt that the cookbook interpretations about that Varga ascendant being this or that is really, you know, useful enough to spend a lot of time with. Sometimes it's a fun curiosity and can trigger some ideas, but it's just not a great way to do astrology. It's really Kali Yuga method of doing astrology, just this blind memorization of things, you know. And how did astrologers do astrology? I mean, how did they manage to do astrology with these cookbook books? The way they did it, they memorized these entire books. They would memorize all of Saravelli or all of Brihat Jataka, have every sutra memorized in that book. And all those things would be lodged in their head. Then when the chart came in front of them, they didn't say, oh, Mars is in Scorpio, therefore this, and Jupiter is in Capricorn, therefore this. They didn't go through it, go through it piece by piece. They didn't go precisely through it and go, okay, I see this interpretation, and I see this interpretation. Had they done that, the interpretation would have been a giant mess. What they did is, they looked at the chart, and their intuition would make something pop. You know, something would just light up. Say, Mars and Scorpio just lit up, and in the Dvadasamsa. And they would quote the result that they learned from that, and the person would go, wow, that's right. And then they might talk a while, and the person will say something about their wife, and they'll look at the chart, and something will pop up in the Navamsha, and then that will connect to something they memorized from one of these books. And that thing will just seem like it. And they'll blame the issue or the problem on that one singular thing. So basically, they'd be connecting with their intuition based on the knowledge the things they've memorized, to remember the right thing at the right time. And that's a good way to do astrology, in the sense of learning lots of things and letting our intuition pick what it wants to talk about. And then our intuition picks something that makes sense to the person's life. And indeed, that may not even be causing it. Like, for instance, say the person says, oh, you're very timid, because he sees Mars and Scorpio Dvadasamsa, and he read that he remembered, Yavana Jataka, that it said that you'll be timid if, you've got that. And so he says you're timid. Well, maybe the truth is they've got a debilitated Mars and then a Saturn-Sun conjunction in their Rashi chart. And that's really what's making them timid. But that person just latched onto that one sutra about that one thing. Now, the problem with doing that type of astrology is if those astrologers took every sutra they memorized and ran it by the chart, the interpretation would end up being meaningless and inaccurate. Just the same way, if you take one of these old classical books like Saravelli or Yavana Jataka, and you look up everything in your chart that those books have and read them, it's not going to sound like you in the end. Some things might, some things won't. If you do it for your friend and you go through the book and read every sutra, you're going to have this meaningless amount of stuff and none of it makes sense. So it's not a really proper way to do astrology. It just works if the intuition latches, oh yeah, I remember reading that, and I see it in the chart, and this must be the person's problem, and your intuition let you pick the right thing. Okay? But Parashara actually gives scientific principles, just like Jaimini does, that you can ruthlessly go through these principles and get a result. You can take the chastity and the capacity yogas that are derived from Parashara that you can get, that you learn about in my compatibility class, and you can ruthlessly grab a person's chart and go through those principles. And if you see them, they're going to work every single time. Okay? You can ruthlessly go through people's Navas yogas, and if you understand those yogas, see the foundation of their character. You could ruthlessly go through the predictive principles, the step-by-step principles, and get reliable answers. Okay? And that's the type of astrology we're doing, because who wants to spend all this time learning stuff just to let your intuition, do all the work for you? It's just not a great way to do astrology. So, in these things, we have a couple of things. We got the Lagna's Dvadasamsa according to Jataka Parigita. Okay? If a person be born in the Dvadasamsa owned by Aries, he will be a mischievous robber and take to the evil ways and practice of such a vicious class of people. Well, that means that 1 in 12 people will be a mischievous robber and take to evil ways and practices. Okay? Well, a lot of people, easily 1 in 12 people, will cheat another person once they have a chance. Okay? But when you read this statement of mischievous robber, it sounds much more serious than that. But if you take it more casually and say, yeah, people are inclined to cheat each other and take advantage, then at that point, that includes almost 90% of humanity, it seems sometimes, right? A large percentage of people, more than 1 in 12. But if you use that statement against everyone that came in with the Dvadasamsa Aries, it wouldn't be accurate. You just wouldn't find them to be that bad. If the person be born in the 12th portion of a sign owned by Taurus, he will have plenty of women and wealth and will suffer from diseases. So they're giving him a Venetian quality and diseases for some reason. Again, if they've got strong things in their Rashi, a Dvadasamsa Taurus is not going to give them all these diseases. Or plenty of women. So these are just not, you're just not going to find these consistent. And I've tried these on different Ayanamshas, different zodiacs. And really, I haven't found anyone to reliably give useful, good results, as good as the techniques that we normally teach, okay? So, if you want to see what a person's really going to do and really what they're going to be like, you have to use the character stuff I teach and the Jaimini Sutras, which really talks about how a person is and what they're like and what they're capable of. All these things, just the Dvadasamsa Lagna is not going to really help us, okay? Now, fortunately, in these books, they do give us some useful statements. For instance, Yavana Jataka says, I have this on the first page, Sutra 36, in each sign there are Dvadasamsas which fill the sign with their own influences. There are subtle modifications with respect to the height or depth of any action when their influences are combined with those of the terms, dashas. Well, this is basically saying the Dvadasamsa is a modification of the Rashi, which makes sense. So say we see a person who's got the Sun in Aries in the Rashi chart. Okay. that means this person's going to be a steadfast, committed person who's going to focus on their goals and be consistent until the fulfillment of those goals, whatever they may be. And those are going to give them success in the context of the bhavas of the sun aspects. But let's say in the Dvadasamsa, I lost my other sun in this one. Okay. Say in the Dvadasamsa that the sun happens to be in debilitation in Libra. Now all of a sudden we've got the Aries nature modified by the sun in Libra nature. So all of a sudden we've got a person who's really, when it comes down to it, not nearly as consistent and steadfast and focused on the goal until its realization as we expected. This person will have bursts of that Aries focus and strength, but interspersed with some flakiness and uncertainty of how to focus and what's worth it for them to do. Okay? And that'll be because of the sun in Libra, where the person, the sun in Aries is able to sacrifice itself towards a goal. Sun in Libra starts thinking, well, is it really worth it for me to do this? What am I really getting out of this? Is this really making my life better and healthier? Sun in Aries will drive itself as hard as it needs to get the job done. Sun in Libra will go, geez, this is starting to get to my health. This is probably not really I should probably back up a little bit or give this up. So it'll give that less of a personal sacrifice nature. It wants to get rewarded for what it does. And the sun, being a planet of sacrifice, doesn't like that concept. That holds the sun back from doing great things. So this person would have these bursts of the Aries confidence and, I'm going to do it no matter what and make that sacrifice. But then after a little while, they'll start thinking, well, maybe this really wasn't such a good idea. And sort of their steam will peter out. So this Libra sun will influence the Aries sun. And that's one way to use the Dvadasamsa, is just look at the differences of what that planet is doing in the Dvadasamsa. And if it is, it's going to modify it. In this case, it would tone it down. If the sun was in Leo, it would affirm that in the Dvadasamsa. If the sun was in Aries in the Dvadasamsa, it would strengthen that sun. So you basically can read the Dvadasamsa placements of the planets just as you would in the Rashi. But it modifies the Rashi position and they sort of blend together. So this would be an Aries Libra person. This would be an Aries Leo person. And that's a real basic, useful way to use the Dvadasamsa. Don't ever just say, oh, your sun's in Aries anymore. Say your sun's in Aries and Leo Dvadasamsa. And now you've got a much more complete picture of their sun. And start with the Aries nature, Within Aries, there's these 12 parts. Aries is like, sun in Aries, like I said, is steadfast, confident, committed to a goal, will make the sacrifices necessary, will be consistent until the realization of that. And sun in Aries is all about activity, creating the empire, making it happen. After that, sun in Aries is not going to be at its best. Sun in Aries is best when it's creating something new, okay? Because that sun just loves to create, it's that creative intelligence, really. Now, say sun's in Aries and in Leo Dvadasamsa. Now, the sun's got a Leo nature, which is a nature of management, command, kingship, lordship, taking care of things, managing things, ruling things. Okay? So, at that point, the sun in Aries is in a phase of, not only creating an empire, but a great ability to manage that empire too. And that would create a much more well-rounded sun in leadership and initiating capacity. Okay? So this person, if they started their own corporation or company, is going to rule it and keep at it. Okay? They're going to maintain it and they're going to manage it too, not just build it and create it. Let's say the sun was in Libra in the Dvadasamsa. Then that's the phase of Aries where the sun has all those, that desire to create and build and do something new, and will stick to that. But after a while, they'll start going, okay, I've done all this. Now, how can I make this really benefit me? And they're much more inclined to sell that corporation and say, geez, I did it, I made it, I'm getting bored. I'm going to take care of my own needs now, starting by selling my corporation for $5 million. So the Sun in Libra will always let go of that thing it built and created, because that's what Libra is about. It's about trade and not identifying with something completely, but using that thing as a tool to have a more comfortable, better, or healthier existence. So that would be a different phase within the Aries. Okay, the Sun Leo would be the fifth phase in Aries, because it's the fifth Dvadasamsa, and that'll be the phase of, managing and really being consistent with something. Whereas the Sun Libra, that's the seventh Dvadasamsa phase within Aries. That will be the phase of, selling in business and letting go of that thing. Okay, in order to, for the benefit of benefiting oneself. Okay, so you can modify all those Dvadasamsa things. Same with the Lagna. Instead of using like this, if the person be born in a Dvadasamsa of Cancer, he will be addicted to bad practices. Well, why would they even say that? Well, because it's ruled by the moon. And the moon is really into getting its needs met. And lots of times getting its needs met, coming from an emotional point of view, will make you just do what you feel like rather than what society dictates or what the rules of your culture dictate. Okay? And of course, Cancer likes foreign things. And getting involved in foreign things tends to be considered bad practices by our traditional culture. Okay, most foreign things are considered inferior. So then we can see some reasons why they give that. But was that really a useful interpretation for us to use? Oh, your Dvadasamsa Lagna is in Cancer, you'll be like this. No, but let's say they've got, let's say that their Lagna is, well, let's make it, let's say their Lagna is Libra. This will be a fun one. Libra Lagna is always good at business and trade. Like Jamie says, Libra gives gain through trade. So these people, Libra is very skilled at creating win-win situations, benefiting from the knowledge and understanding of others and taking that and possibly turning it into something better. Developing things that are already there into better ways is a Libra quality. Making things more valuable is a Libra quality. So the person would have that personality and nature. Then let's say the Dvadasamsa Lagna was in Cancer. Well, that's going to be modified by Cancer. Okay? Well, that could get really interesting because all of a sudden now we got Cancer, which rules foreign places. So this would be a person that would excel at foreign trade, for instance, or international business. Okay? Or currency trading, something that has to do with trade in foreign places. Then the person also, Libra is really creating win-win things. Cancer is more into trying to create its own comforts. It's much more egocentric in what it wants to do. It really wants to be fulfilled first. And the way Cancer and the moon works, it fulfills itself first. And as a result of that, there's a natural outpouring of goodness that happens. It's kind of like Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Jupiter's the planet of giving blessings. Well, blessings are just something that comes from a fulfilled person, right? That's why seeing an enlightened person is a blessing. Because that an enlightened person, a true Jupiter person, has so much goodness pouring out of them that just being in contact with them helps you. And so Jupiter in Cancer is all about getting self-fulfilled. And once one's truly self-fulfilled, then that just pours onto everyone we meet. And that's true giving, right? If Jupiter's in another place, like Jupiter's in Capricorn, where it's debilitated, a person really wants to find meaning and purpose. So they try to do good things. They try to do the right thing because they want to feel like their life has meaning and purpose. Because they don't feel like it has it. So basically, their actions are coming out of emptiness. So how much of a blessing is anything that they really do? It's not really a blessing. It's an action to make that person feel like their life is not worthless. So Cancer is very much into self-fulfillment. And I wanted to give that example of Jupiter and saying that self-fulfillment is not a negative thing. We have to be self-fulfilled in order to give anything of use to anybody or anything, right? So the Cancer Dvadasamsa would make the Libra person much more self-fulfilled, meaning they would be much more into what personally gives them satisfaction. So where the normal Libra trader is going to be happy to buy and sell and trade anything that he can, that he can make money on, anything that's an opportunity. Libra is a big opportunist. With the Cancer Dvadasamsa, the person's going to not want to be an opportunist with things that don't matter to them. So they had a chance to buy a warehouse of stuff and sell at a huge profit. If that stuff didn't warm their heart somehow and make them feel, good somehow, or wasn't interesting to them, they would just pass it by and go do something else. So I would modify that business, that complete businessman capacity of Libra into making a person much more personal in the types of things they want to do business with. Okay? So, whatever the Lagna is, if you're into reading Lagna signs, modify that in accordance with the Dvadasamsa Lagna. And that will give you a much more accurate idea of that person's Lagna. And looking at the Dvadasamsa Lagna is actually better in this respect than looking at the Navamsa Lagna. So a person who's got Libra in the Rashis and Scorpio in the Navamsa and Scorpio in the Navamsa and Sagittarius in the Dvadasamsa is going to be a more Libra Sag Scorpio person than it'll be a Libra Scorpio Sag person. So the Dvadasamsa will carry more weight as a modifier to Libra than will the Navamsa, which would have been Scorpio in that example. And then, of course, you always have to judge all the planets, right? So, Moon in Libra, ascendant is going to be much different than, Jupiter in Libra. And really, a planet in the ascendant is always going to dominate over the ascendant sign. So someone with Jupiter in the first house, on this ascendant cusp, is always going to have a more Jupiter personality than the personality of that sign. And that sign will just show how capable that Jupiter personality really is. But when you see that person, you're always going to see Jupiter more than Libra or whatever sign is there. Planets dominate our consciousness, not the Rashis. The Rashis are just the playing field, so to speak. Okay? So that's sort of examples of how you can use these Dvadasamsas to modify that. So if you start looking at it and you say right away you look, oh, they're Virgo ascendant and this person's like this or this means this. Next step, go to the Dvadasamsa and modify what you just said based on that Dvadasamsa. And then you'll see more individual personalities emerge. Whereas now, whenever your Virgo ascendant comes in, you already have certain expectations of what they're going to be like, let's say. But you find all of them are a little different. Well, go to the Dvadasamsa to see where a lot of those differences will come into place. And then you get 12 more personalities. Okay? Now, Yavana Jataka gives us the results of all the planets in the Dvadasamsa. Okay? Again, those results, just to use those in the cookbook style, aren't going to be really great because these are all modifications of what's in the Rashi chart. So, Sun in Aries, and then in the Dvadasamsa of Leo, say, okay, let's put the Sun in Aries in the Rashi. In the Dvadasamsa of Leo, that Leo Dvadasamsa Sun is going to be much different than the Sun in Aquarius with the Leo Dvadasamsa. They're two completely different things. So to say, well, Sun in Dvadasamsa, Sun in Leo Dvadasamsa is going to be like this, will never be true. Because it might be in Leo Dvadasamsa, but where's the Sun in these other Vargas? Okay? So, if we want to make interpretation based on planets and signs, we have to look at the planet and signs in lots of places. And then it gets confusing really well. And I never do it. Personally, I just will never do it. Because you can get everything you need to see what the person's going to be like and what they're capable like from Jaimini Sutras, from the stuff I cover in the Astrology of Character audio course, or which are in the first half of Core Yogas, and from the Compatibility, Capacity, and Shasta Yogas. Those three things, and Shadbala, of course, which is how the person uses the planet. Those four things will give you so much depth about who that person is that you'll be able to talk to that person all day long. Seriously, it's all you'll ever need to know. And it's the good, solid, juicy stuff that matters. Vargas are really what you need when you want to make predictions, though. And when you need to make predictions, this stuff is not going to make a big difference to you. You know, Mars in Scorpio Dvadasamsa being timid and weak is not going to help you in making a prediction, right? What will help you making a prediction is Mars in Scorpio is going to be in its own Rashi. And then we need to look at the other influences onto Mars and which houses Mars influences. And then we can predict the effects that Mars is going to have in that Dvadasamsa Varga. Okay? So, Vargas, trying to just say what the person's like based on these sutras from these two books, it's just going to not get you going anywhere really useful. And it's not going to be consistent either. So, Vargas are really important for using for predicting things. For seeing the nature of the character, you can just focus on those other things. It's going to give you, like I said, hours and hours of important things to talk about, and things that will always explain why a person's a certain way in a way that's making a difference in their life. Okay? Now, Dvadasamsa is one of the important Vargas, like I mentioned, where the Dvadasamsa affects all areas of life due to the effects of your ancestral karma. Okay? So, many of the Vargas, most of the Vargas between 1 and 7 affect all areas of life, have the capacity to affect all areas of life. And one of the important things and that's really the way to use the Vargas. It's just seeing, okay, in the Rashi chart, Venus is looking really bad for love. Why are they married? Because Venus is also given an effect in other charts too. Now, if in the Rashi chart Venus is in bad shape, the path to marriage was certainly a difficult path. But we wouldn't want to just say no right away. Okay? We have to look at what Venus is doing in the other Vargas, and can Venus produce marriage in another Varga that will make a difference. So we do need to look at everything in all Vargas to really see what's going on. And now that we've gone through these first set of 12 Vargas, first 8 Vargas, but Vargas 1 through 12, you have a good idea what each Varga is for and how to predict with each Varga. And of course, we're going to focus on Dvadasamsa examples and use Dvadasamsa for predictions in the next few videos. We still have to learn how to really use all the Vargas for making predictions. Okay? And that's actually a relatively simple thing. But before you do that, it's important to understand, why does the Dvadasamsa have the capacity to improve or to create things in our life? Why does the Hora? Why does the Drekana? Why does the Dasamsa? Why does the Chaturtamsa? Why do these Vargas have the capacity to make something? Okay? For anything to be really great in life, say you've got Venus aspecting your ascendant, or your 7th house. That means Venus is going to produce marriage. A 7th house thing. Because there's lots of 7th house things, right? One of them is marriage. There's also business partnerships. That's Mercury influencing the 7th Bhava. But let's go back to Venus. If Venus is influencing the 7th Bhavakas, Venus is going to produce marriage. Okay, there'll be 7th house relationships with the opposite sex produced into your life. If Venus is in good dignity, that will be a beneficial relationship. If it's in bad dignity, Venus relationships will be producing difficulties into your life. Okay? For something to be truly good, you need that Venus to be influencing in all the Vargas. So in the Rashi chart, you want Venus in good dignity influencing the 7th, showing the path to marriage is smooth. In the Hora chart, you want it there so you can be responsible in the context of your relationship. That you're responsible and that you have a sense of accomplishment with your relationship. And the Drekana, you want that Venus aspect in the 7th from good dignity so that you really can associate well with them, and you can bring into your relationship the things that you want to, that are on your mind, and manifest what's in your consciousness with your partner successfully. In the chapter Tamsha, you want Venus influencing the 7th from good dignity so that you really feel like this, you're really fortunate in your marriage, and that that marriage actually increases fortune in your life. Then in the Subtamsha, you want Venus influencing so you have a good sex life, again, from good dignity. If all those other ones are good, and then Venus is debilitated and aspecting your 7th in the Subtamsha, then all of a sudden your sex life isn't good. Everything else is good, but your sex life is bad. In the Devamsha, you want Venus influencing your 7th well, so that you feel a sense of meaning and purpose that helps you stay on that marriage path. In the Samsha, if you have Venus influencing your 7th, then your marriage allows you to create greater things and do greater things in your life. And in the Dvadasamsa, if it's there too, the blessings of your ancestors makes your relationship and marriage even better. So to have something perfect, you need the planet in good dignity in all the Vargas. And any place where the planet's in bad dignity will be where that relationship or thing would suffer. Okay? Same with wealth. Say, you've got Jupiter influencing the 2nd cusp. So you've got wealth. Now, if in the Navamsha Jupiter's debilitated influencing that 2nd house, the wealth doesn't give you any sense of purpose or meaning or fulfillment. And so it's empty wealth. Though in all the other Vargas it might be strong. So you've got a fortune of wealth, and your children create wealth or have wealth, and everything else is nice. But you can still have a lack. So it's hard for anything to be perfect in life, but we need to learn to use the Vargas that way to see the whole picture. Because lots of times people will come in and they'll complain about something that they have. Have you noticed that? They're married, but that's a common one, right? Because it's hard to get along with anyone. They have money, but they have a good job, but there's always these complaints people have, even when they have something. So you see, prediction is not just about predicting you're going to have it and you're not going to have it, but oftentimes it's about predicting you have it, but you're filling these holes anyway. And that's why we have these different Vargas, because they show where those holes may or may not be, where they're fulfilled or where they're empty. So that's really the way to use Vargas. And we use the principles from Parashara, and that works way better than these cookbook interpretations of planets and Vargas and Lagnas and Vargas and stuff. But I put these here because you will run into them, and so that when you study them, you won't try to think these are gold. They're just some kind of thing you can play with and see if you can get some juice out of. And every once in a while you'll get some juice out of them, but it really won't be nearly what you get from the Parashara principles and applying those principles to the charts. And applying those character things in the Vas Yogas and all that kind of stuff and Shadbala to the person's character and nature. Okay, so we're going to do some Dvadasamsa examples in the next couple of videos. And, use the Dvadasamsa deities and all that stuff. And then you'll see the Dvadasamsa come much, much more to life than just trying to read the Dvadasamsa on this. Try this on your chart and a few people's charts, and you're just going to see it's just hit and miss stuff. And while you could try to figure out every reason why they wrote this stuff, it's not going to really be useful because it's still used in a way that's so isolated, and you can't use anything in an isolated fashion. When you look at the sun, you never look at it as a sign. You never say the sun's in Aries. You say the sun is at 9 degrees Aries, which means 9 degrees, which means in the Navamsha, the sun is in Gemini. It means that in the chapter Tamsha, the sun is in Cancer, in the 4th Varga. That in the Dvadasamsa, the sun will be still in the Dasamsha, the sun will be here. In the Dvadasamsa, the sun will be in Cancer. And that you're looking at all that whenever you look at a planet. That's what you have to do. You have to go, and the sun is in 18 is in Libra, Shashtiyamsha. You have to look at the sun exactly where it is. You can't just say, the sun's in this huge 30 degrees part of space, and therefore you are this way. You have to look exactly where that sun is. So anytime you look at a planet, you really should look at it in all the Vargas. You want to see what that sun is really like. And one of the biggest modifications to that sun position, in a way that you can see very readily and easily, will be the modification based on the Dvadasamsa. So it's a good Varga to start with. Okay?